meeting, so I'm going to call it to order at 1:01. I believe we have our directors are all here, but I'm going to start by everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Secretary, may we do the roll call, please?
Scott Sedgley, Bernie Narvaez, Liz Alessio, Amber Manfree, Mark Joseph,
Here.
Pierre Washington,
Here.
Margie Moeller,
Here.
Robin McKee,
Here.
Paul Doring,
Here.
Michelle Deasy,
Here.
Donald Williams,
Present.
Kevin Eisenberg,
Here.
Deborah Smith. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, want to change anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll
second.
Director Alessio moved.
Washington second.
McKee or adopting, and I have to get a name plaque of everybody because I keep forgetting everybody's. Oh, Washington seconded? All right, then I have to get my hearing checked. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public comment. Oh, any, good. We have one.
Good afternoon, Chair Joseph and members of the board. My name is Ashley Tencher and I serve on the Community Advisory Committee. 2 weeks ago, I reached out to staff with 3 questions about the countywide transportation plan 2026 planning process. And I just learned that reply is pending, but since I had not received a reply as of this meeting, I'm here today to raise these questions publicly.
Will you speak louder, please? Ashley?
Certainly.
Okay, go.
As you know, the CTP involves a complex structure of categories, goals, objectives, and performance metrics. The board's input earlier this year led to revised goals and objectives adopted May 2025, followed by the updated performance metrics presented in September. What surprised me is that bus performance and transit ridership metrics are missing from that latest update. So I'd like to restate my 3 questions. Why was the on-time bus performance metric removed? Why wasn't a trip completeness by day or vehicle positions completeness by day metric added? And how did the changes to the 2021 to 2025 goals and objectives lead to the elimination of bus performance metrics? I'm still interested in hearing the reasoning behind those decisions. Back in September, agenda item 11.3, staff explained that, quote, the CTP performance metrics were revised to improve accountability and demonstrate the effectiveness of transportation investments. I completely agree with those goals. Accountability and effectiveness are essential. But to truly demonstrate them, we need to include transit performance in the metrics we track and focus on as a board. I hear from staff that we look at transit all the time, but you don't, and I'm imploring you to consider doing so. Therefore, I respectfully ask NVTA to add back the following measures: on-time bus performance weighted by ridership, and transit ridership measured by annual boardings and alightings, and to consider adding either trip completeness by day or vehicle positions completeness by day. These metrics are fundamental to understanding how our transit system is performing and whether investments are delivering results for riders. As we all know, what NVTA focuses on tends to improve. So I'm asking for more focus on transit performance in the CTP 2026 draft performance metrics. Here's my perspective as a rider advocate. If reliably say 95% of the time see the bus in real time on their phones, not just scheduled time. They would plan around that reliability. They'd know they could count on the system to get them where they need to go. That's what drives ridership. Thank you for considering these requests and for continuing to make data-driven decisions that improve accountability, transparency, and trust in our public transportation system.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comments? Any online? All right, thank you. Well, from there, we will go to chairperson, board members, MTC, and ABEG updates and comments. I don't have any. Any board members? MTC report.
Owen. Thank you. Okay. Senate Bill 53, on October 13th, Governor Gavin Newsom signed the transportation revenue measure enabling legislation authorizing placement of the of a measure on the 2026 November ballot. 14-year half-cent sales tax to sustain and improve public transportation. This is focused on a 5-county region in the south of Carquinez and the Golden Gate. So this would primarily go to transportation there, particularly BART, which everyone knows has been struggling in recent years. There are rider-focused improvements included in this that will be applied Bay Area wide, and because Vine service connects to many of the regional systems such as BART that will benefit from the measure, it would relate to us here in Napa that way. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission will be holding a new item. MTC will be holding a commission workshop on October 22nd to 23rd at Embassy Suites in Walnut Creek. The workshop will largely focus on transit-oriented communities, policy, and One Bay Area grant funding. And to my knowledge, many of the members are planning on attending. I plan on attending, as does Belia Ramos. MTC is working on the One Bay Area grant cycle 4 guidelines, which they plan to bring to the commission in 2026. The federal block grant funding under cycle 4 is expected to be less than previous cycles due to diminishing highway trust fund revenues. MTC is currently advancing capacity under OBAG 3 in the anticipated shutdown of the Transportation Improvement Plan program, the TIP. This is a comprehensive listing of surface transportation projects in the Bay Area that receive federal funding or are considered regionally significant for air quality. In June 2025, the president rescinded waivers granted by the EPA that allowed for California to establish its own emission standards for vehicles, which I think we're all familiar with what that means. It's pretty, has pretty broad impacts for California and for states that relate to California in their transportation planning as well. While the waiver rescission is tied to broader legal and regulatory issues between the state and federal government, it has direct implications for transportation planning and project delivery in the Bay Area. In anticipation of the shutdown of the TIP, MTC is advancing federal planning and projects funds for 1 year through the TIP.
All right, thank you.
And Mark,
ABEG.
ABAG, I have just 2 items. First, ABAG is in the process of selecting their community advisory councils and appointments. And on October 29th, North Bay has a planned Bay Area 2050 webinar. So if anyone is interested in looking at that, I don't have the link or the, I just have the date and time, 12 p.m.
What day?
October 29th.
10:29. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Then we'll move to the executive director's update.
Yes, good afternoon. Danielle Schmitz, Executive Director. So if you've traveled to Sonoma County, you've probably noticed that Highway 121 is currently closed right now, which is causing a lot of backup and diversion onto Napa Road. This is a Caltrans planned project. They are fixing guardrails on the Arroyo Seco Bridge. And I just wanted to, we've had a lot of inquiries about it from the public and some board members. And so Caltrans and Sonoma County are working on synchronizing the signals at Napa Road better. And the project should be opened back up by November 1st. So hopefully in the next couple weeks. And Caltrans might have more update on that. And then I wanted to report on last Wednesday was Walk and Roll to School Day, and the Napa Bicycle Coalition reported there were 2,000 students who participated by walking and bicycling or rolling to school, and they had 15 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 4 high schools participate. And Browns Valley Elementary in Napa was the winner with most participants. And then I am happy to report that transit staff has been working diligently, and this will kind of refer to the public comment that we received, diligently on real-time data for bus vehicle location. And staff has worked with a third-party ConX that performed an audit of our system and troubleshooted potential issues with connectivity. And I'm happy to report that 80% of our vehicle trips are now visible on our mobile app as of last month. This is a 20% increase in visibility in real-time data for our transit system. And a lot of this is due to new equipment purchases. Like we did receive 14 new electric buses over this summer that have updated equipment as well as new routers. And so just kudos to Rebecca and the transit team, so working diligently on this issue. And then I would just say that this statistic, the real-time data, bus visibility, as well as on-time performance and key passenger and other key performance indicators such as Vine passengers per revenue hour are all very important. The countywide transportation plan is a very broad plan, and those kinds of KPIs would be included in something like a short-range transit plan that is specific around our transit system. So that's sort of where we're coming from with that. And then on the Director Manfrey talked about the one piece of legislation, SB 63, that was the transit measure for the Bay Area. And the other measure I wanted to report out on is SB 697, which authorizes the State Route 37 corridor project to have a longer construction window beyond 10 weeks. This was also signed by the governor on October 8th and is vastly important to that project. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight 3 upcoming events. So tomorrow, the Resilient 37 team is holding a listening meeting in Vallejo from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. NVTA is hosting an active transportation plan digital open house on October 21st. There's a little flyer at your seat providing more information about that. And then finally, come out and visit NVTA staff this weekend at the St. Helena Harvest Festival on October 18th. We will be tabling up in St. Helena. So that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for that report. And I know we haven't, the consent item has our federal legislative update, which also talks about SB 63 and the other that you mentioned on for 37. And that was a very good report. And I think that we've taken that, I'm kind of off subject. Let me get back on subject. On subject, because you mentioned that. On subject regarding, you know, again, the public comment and having that data, the real-time data, congratulations and you know, to staff too for that 20% increase. We have 80% of visibility. And so just to clarify, if I look at my app and I'm out trying to decide whether I'm going to walk, beg for a ride, or wait for the bus or whatever, get an Uber, I can get on that app and I can see exactly where the bus is located, whether I just missed it or whether it's yet to come. So that's actually visible in real time.
Yes, so when we talk about the visibility of our bus systems, is that 80% of our vehicles that are deployed last month were visible. And
Right.
before that, we'd been hovering around 60%. So there's a 20% increase because of all these measures that we were taking into effect. One of them is that we did have new equipment. We purchased new routers. We also contracted with a third party to look at troubleshooting our bus real-time visibility. And so all of those really important data metrics are captured in a plan. It just needs to be the right plan. And the short range transit plan or transit specific plan is really where those would be captured. And we have it in our transit policies as well as far as goals and objectives around the transit
Thank you.
statistics.
I appreciate that. It does seem just to the every lay person, including myself, that it would be something, it would be a positive redundancy if it was also captured in the CTP as being mentioned of something. It does seem like it's a bit of a miss, and I understand the public comment on that. So I just want to put that out there in terms of like, just in terms of public consumption and understanding. And then the last is on the data that's being captured through this great technology. Again, I want to thank Rebecca Schenk for all her great work and leadership. Thank you, Rebecca. She works really hard on transit. Will we be receiving reports and updates on the outcomes on these different areas that were also mentioned here at SAF? Is this I know we get updates from transit. Will that be included in terms
Yeah,
of the
so
real-time data and how we're doing in these
Yeah,
areas?
we include, yes.
Okay,
So, and we can include that periodically in our Vine Transit update that we provide quarterly.
that would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Then we will move to Caltrans update.
Good afternoon, board members. Can you hear me? Well,
Just barely.
oh. Can you hear me now better?
Better, but not a lot, but a better.
Okay, I'll just raise my voice. So, good afternoon, board members. Caltrans Regional Project Manager Amani. I'm going to report Caltrans report. So basically, the report and map of the 42 active projects in the design and construction phases are included in the agenda packet. And just going to highlight some of the topics. First of them is the State Route 29 repaving north of Madison Street and Yountville between Postma 19.8 and 21.5. The director order, which has been approved in the district last month, has gone to the headquarters, and it has been resent back to the district with some of the comments. And with the critical status of the shop funding, the headquarters requiring more detailed analysis and limitation to the work which is necessary to address the issues. The revised director order has been submitted yesterday to headquarters, and there is a support from the headquarters maintenance, asset management, and the district while working with the headquarters programming to get the approval. So the contract amount now is 2.5 million with a total cost of 3 million that includes the construction support. And the tentative beginning will be in October 27 with 45 working days. And completion is tentative will be on February 2026. The second topic is related to the State Route 29 CAP-M project, which is currently under construction. The CCA or the construction will be completed, targeted in November 2026. Currently, the contractor is working on the striping, which is target for completion the coming Friday, 10/17. And will follow with the electrical loop detectors, which is target next week in October 24. And then the guardrail installation will commence, and we are talking about almost 3,500 linear feet with vegetation control, and which will be completed within 2 weeks by end of October. The third, as our NVTA Director Danielle mentioned, is the Arroyo Seco Bridge in Sonoma County. And this is a bridge railing upgrade replacement in Sonoma 121. Caltrans closed the Route 12 and 121 for 30 days duration that commenced on October 1st, and it will end by October 31st, allow the workers to replace bridge railing on the Arroyo Seco Bridge. And the detour will be from in State Route 121 from 8th Street East to Napa Road and vice versa. As of today, there is no potential weather delays or early openings are expected. And if there is any weather or changes in the schedule, this will be announced through the social media. By this, I conclude Catherine's report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. A lot of that was choppy a little bit, so there may be some questions or not. All right, yes, Director Alessio.
Thank you. And once again, I want to compliment this new map and the table that you now provide. I think it's really helpful. My question is for Highway 29 and the work that's being done. I see the pavement is done in many sections, but striping hasn't occurred. And so at nighttime, it becomes difficult for people who are driving rather quickly to know who's in what lane and who's not going to go off the off the highway a little bit. Do we know when that's going to occur?
For the striping, due to the weather, which occurred yesterday, the work stopped, but it's commencing now, and it's supposed to be completed by this Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, then thank you for your report. And we are now going to move into our presentation on the Michelin Mobility Intelligence. And so, yeah, it makes me get hungry, but I'm
Good
sure
afternoon, Chair Joseph, members of the board, Diana Meehan, Planning Program Manager. As you know, we received an Office of Traffic Safety grant for a road safety data study, and we worked with Michelin Mobility Intelligence team. We accomplished this work over the course of this past year. We're proud to announce that yesterday we were informed by the Office of Traffic Safety that this project will be highlighted in their annual report. So with that, I'd like to introduce Joel Fazol and Nishant Parikh with Michelin Mobility Intelligence, and they're going to walk you through the project highlights.
Thank you, Diane. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for having us. Definitely excited to give an update on the great work we've accomplished together. Nishant, can you go to the next slide? Awesome. So when we kicked things off with Diane and the crew back in February, she shared yes, a little bit about your Vision Zero goals and the grant itself. And, we outlined our project goals, which were to identify the safety risks for all road users across Napa County, as well as to understand where some of the higher risk areas are based off of driving behaviors that may not have already been apparent through traditional crash analysis. And some of the challenges her and the team shared with us was, there's a lot of intra-county travel by residents and commuters, also have a lot of tourism that, adds a lot of traffic volume and safety risks. And this combined with a lot of vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists, they're exposed to speeding and impaired driving, as well as general safety concerns around tourism centers and school zones as well, where there's been recurring issues around speeding near those. So to outline the scope, we looked at the entire county. We used primarily the time periods of April, May, and June 2024, though we did also compare it to April and May of 2023. And so, yep, Nishant. Before we get into the actual study findings and everything, I find it helpful to orient everybody, make sure we're kind of all on the same page. So at a high level, what telematics is this data from either mobile apps or equipment within a vehicle that monitor how, where, and when our vehicle is driven. So that can be anything from speed to harsh braking and swerving to other elements around the car. And so what happens is that data gets transmitted wirelessly either through like a cell network or satellite, and then the data gets processed to allow us to spot patterns and risks and opportunities for improvement. And from that, we're able to generate actionable insights. And so that's really where Michelin Mobility Intelligence sits, is generating those actionable insights. All right, and so what that means specifically for Michelin is we leverage data from over 40,000 different mobile apps as well as in-vehicle apps that our data science team is able to turn into a lot of key insights around your road network and the behaviors going on there. So at its foundation, what we do is we collect what we call driver events. So that's whenever you have a driver that brakes, really hard or accelerates. So think about you brake and your purse or bag falls off the passenger seat. It's something to that extent. And so from there, we get 2 seconds worth of data that tells us the speed, the heading, the acceleration, time of day, location, things like that around that 2 second event. And so what we do is we process that and several other data sources to identify risk hotspots and also run our crash risk models for vulnerable road users as well as vehicles. And so this allows us to help measure the impact of any projects going on or any changes you do as well. Nishan, you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Joel and Diana, and good afternoon, everyone. So as part of this study, we conducted multiple analysis, and one of the key component of this study was vulnerable road user risk analysis. So for this analysis, we leveraged Michelin's VRU crash risk model, which basically is an advanced AI model which understands the local driving behavior and also incorporates the contextual data such as the roadway infrastructure as well as the point of interest information. And then it predicts a risk score for each road segment across the entire network. It basically, essentially tells us that what is the likelihood of having a crash involving a VRU at a specific location in future. So I'll quickly switch to, to a visualization map just to show this VRU model in action. So what you see here is a web-based mapping tool, which we also provided as part of this study to NVTA. And right now what you're seeing on the screen is the Napa County and the VRU risk projected here. So I'll just zoom into one area where, just to give you a glimpse of it, there's the city of Calistoga. And what you see here is the roads which are shaded with the color green are basically having less VRU risk. However, in contrast, the road segments shaded with the colors of orange, red, and dark red are basically the ones with higher VRU risk, which where the darker the shade means higher the VRU risk. So this provides a very intuitive and it's very easy to identify the locations which have higher risk and helps with informed decision making. In addition to that, there are other layers, as you see on the left-hand sides, related to the vehicle crash risk, the driving behavior events data set, school ranking, and the speed information, which basically makes it a comprehensive tool to further proactive and data-driven decision making for road safety. So as we move further, we also analyzed this safety around the school zones across Napa County, and we assigned a risk score for each school zone, as you can see on the top table, where the score is basically calculated between 0 to 1. 0 means low risk, and the values which are closer to 1 means higher the risk are. The score is calculated using considering the different driving behavior indicators, such as the volumes of driving behaviors, harsh braking, harsh acceleration, their severity, the speeds at which those events were happening, as well as the crash risk for VRU, as well as the vehicle crash risk. And then then it assigned the respective risk scores around each school zone. So one thing I wanted to call out is on the number one spot, which is the Unidos Middle School. Here, the analysis was done based on 2024 data. However, this is school, the area around the school has recently undergone several improvements in 2025 to improve road safety. There were additional areas where we did the analysis, which were also part of this study. The primary criteria of identifying these highlight areas were based on two components. One was through the insights from driving behavior and the crash risk model. And the second criteria was the inputs coming from the community. So we combined both of these and then identified these three locations where we dig deep a little further and provided insights around what's happening there, what are the risk factors, and what are the risk elements present at these locations. So coming to key takeaways, as part of the overall analysis, what we observed is that the most drivers in the county, they respect the speed limits and drive within the limits. However, there were small percentage of drivers who were driving consistently with extreme speeding and several times exceeding 100 miles per hour. And they were also engaging in extreme driving behaviors like harsh braking and rapid acceleration, which means if they increase a risk of having severe or fatal crashes. In addition to that, we also identified several hotspots of extreme driving behavior, which were around school zones, which indicated high-risk conditions for the students near those schools. And then the historical data, which we received from NVTA and the MMI VRU crash risk prediction model, they both indicated there were consistent risk across the county for both pedestrians and cyclists. So at the end, as we already looked briefly into the mapping tool, I just want to talk a little bit more about it, which we are providing along with this study. So it's a ready-to-use browser-based mapping tool, which supports further data exploration around road safety and also facilitate ongoing monitoring and evaluation of some projects. It supports with the strategic alignment through the data-driven decisions, as well as supports cross-domain application from enforcement, infrastructure to policy. It also helps with prioritizing resources on high-risk areas and helps with monitoring and evaluation of interventions and countermeasures, and also supports funding cases for those projects. It further helps, and it's a great tool for community engagement with basically providing transparency through the data-backed insights to the community. So with that, I'll just open this for any question and answers.
Okay, well, I'll start off. Was there anything from this study that you learned that was counterintuitive, or we didn't see it coming, that kind of thing? Or does that question make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I think for us, that's one of the things we love about working with somebody like NVTA is where we have kind of the local person on the ground. And so there were a lot of discussions with Diane where we're reviewing results and seeing kind of some things that stuck out. And I know that there were a couple where she highlighted, that's interesting. And we, dug in and did some more analysis. And also, I remember there was one discussion we had where we were looking at VRU risks, and there were actually, we were a little surprised to see some a little bit more far-flung, and then Diana was able to provide a little context around that being, an area where there were a lot of cyclists, kind of closer to wineries, where there may be some driving under the influence going on as well. So it was really interesting that, Nishant and I, not being local, through the team running the models, we're able to pick up some of those risks.
Yeah. And also, in addition to that, we were able to see some risk areas, which were basically the intersection of the class 1 bike trails, as well as the, where the vehicles are intersecting. And there were locations which highlighted greater risk for the cyclist getting into a situation where they could crash into vehicles, as well as as I highlighted in the key takeaways, where it basically tells us that speeding is an issue, but it's not like general public is speeding. There is a small percentage, but then that small percentage is really speeding, and at very high speeds, which increases the risk. So of course, I mean, this can also helps in what kind of measures needs to be taken in order to improve road safety and avoid future crashes because of people who are speeding.
Okay, thank you. And then also, will we be getting a copy of this report?
Yes, you will. And there'll be, in combination with the maps, there'll be a written report. The written report we're going to publish on our website. This mapping tool will be distributed to all the public works teams and also the law enforcement teams, which I've been meeting with one-on-one periodically through the course of this. In particular with the law enforcement teams, they're very limited in their resources countywide, and in particular CHP. I was surprised to know that there are only 2 on duty for the entire county and they're splitting some of that time into Sonoma County. So it's a challenge to know where to, when you've got 750 square miles in a county, where to localize your enforcement. And this can provide an additional tool for those areas that are showing up as potential high risk. It's, some of those are known, but a few of those that were lighting up were not so much known. And I think I'll highlight one other thing, which was that came up with my conversation with the City of Napa Public Works and traffic teams, noticing a lot of hot spots in the east-west direction, which readily we don't think that could potentially mean the issues with light or sun in your face, and that a lot of it was showing up on some of those. So you've got potential for speeding, light conditions that can exacerbate some of those conditions. So that was kind of an interesting thing that propped up when we were having these conversations. But yeah, we want them to take some time with the tool. My reluctance in just putting this tool out to the public is that, this data is, and this is, the MMI team is only just touching on the capability here and what this data means and how to use the data. And we want it in the hands of folks that have an understanding of how to use the data.
Okay.
So we hope that it'll be a tool for us moving forward to inform, when we have limited resources, where to focus for advancing our Vision Zero goals.
Okay, thank you. Director Doring.
Thank you all for the report. It's excellent work. I'm the mayor of the city of St. Helena, and so as you know, the Pratt Avenue intersection obviously is a focus of mine. We all tend to be, territorial in a certain way, but I'm really interested in breaking down the data as much as possible and making sure that when there's a descriptor that says Pratt, I want to really dive into that to make sure it's maybe other areas around there. That's a tree tunnel for folks who don't know that in our north of our city. Culinary Institute's on one side, complete lack of infrastructure there, in my view, very difficult. I don't actually see it from my experience because I drive that every day as a Pratt Avenue Highway 29 issue, although that may be the general descriptor. But more importantly, I think it would be helpful to know in the report whether there will be recommendations made to the local jurisdictions who have well, that's a Caltrans issue also, but recommendations in terms of what can be done to reduce these incidents. And I guess so that's the one question I have. And the second one is, I assume that this did not capture any data for the buying trail, given that it looked like 23 and 24, or maybe partially because one of the things that we all know in the north part of the county is that there are a lot of sudden stops at crossings. That has dissipated a little bit, but it still happens from time to time. Folks are confused by the crossing when lights go on, or still to a certain degree by the stop signs in certain areas where folks are trying to pedestrians and bicyclists are crossing over Highway 29. And that would be important data for us to know so we can continue to improve that. So those are my two comments and questions.
Okay, to answer the first question, yes, Pratt was just used as an identifier. You know, you use the nearest intersection to the location. And this part of this came from, you know, we were certainly limited in the amount of study we could do here. We wanted to cover the entire county, but for focus areas, we chose 3. And the basis for that was what this data was showing and the model was indicating. And also we received a comment at our board retreat, you might recall, from your city manager about that particular location in the CIA. So we chose that as one of the areas
Excellent.
to take.
Thank you for that response.
Yeah. and then remind me of your second question.
Well, I was talking about the report itself, whether there will be maybe an appendix to it so I can really see the data, but then also more equally importantly to me is the potential for recommendations to make improvements to reduce these incidents.
Yes, that is absolutely
And
the
then the
goal.
bike trail,
Yeah.
whether that's included in the report.
Yeah, there are some, not so much in the upper valley on the Vine Trail, because as we indicated, this was in 23, 24. We did see some issues in and around part of the Vine Trail in the south part of the county. And I think Oak Knoll in particular, that's a stop controlled intersection that goes into a signalized intersection at the highway. So vehicles are approaching on Solano Avenue at the stop. And then the Vine Trail also crosses in that vicinity. So, you know, we saw some things light up there that were actually showing what was going on the Vine Trail. So, you know, it would indicate that those are bikes or pedestrians in that location, but there was high incidence or high potential for incidents at the intersections. And that's pretty common anywhere on a class 1 facility. You know, whenever there's a crossing, it's just like any type of crossing or intersection, you want to take a look at what the conditions are and how you might mitigate safety particularly for vulnerable road users, which is what we call bicycles and pedestrians. But yes, there are several locations where we want to take a deeper dive. There are already projects on the books, potentially, where this is just another tool in the toolbox when we're applying for grant funding to indicate, yes, we're seeing some issues here. One of the kind of the key features of all of this is this is information that we didn't have before that sort of complements the information we do have, which is crash data is after the fact. It's after the crash has occurred, that's submitted into a statewide system. We get that, it gets validated, we get that data back. This is providing us some additional detail in where the potential for crashes might be, even if one hasn't occurred in an area. So the goal here really behind Vision Zero is to be proactive and not reactive. And if there's an area where we're seeing it light up, maybe it's an opportunity for us to focus some additional research or enforcement or mitigations to improve the situation, at least go further to observe what's going on in the area that might be increasing that potential. Not particularly out of this plan, but we could go forward with some additional focus study. This is just the first step into what we're seeing where potential areas of issue are. We could certainly focus in. And again, as I mentioned, if there are already projects that we know about, this is another feature or tool in the toolbox. If there are areas that are lighting up that we weren't aware of, then that would bode us going in and doing some further study into those areas to have a greater understanding of what the potential countermeasures might be to reduce the risk.
I think it would be important to be able to use the data for improvement, and I'd like to see that, and more specifically, and I'm sure everybody has that same point in mind. And then my other question was just the really raw data. Will that be attached to this report in an appendix so that I can look at specifically? Well, I'd like to look at the entire county, of course, but I'm really wanting to focus in on that, and I'm wondering if I can get that data.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you can get the data, and this is a study, and a lot of times in the study, we gather data, we aggregate data, or we disseminate data, and so it's very data specific. I think what you're talking about is a plan, right? And then once we have that data, what do we do with it? Well, we create a plan.
Mhm.
And as you know, we created the first Vision Zero plan back I think 2 years
2023.
ago. Yes, and so what we can do is as we update, whether it be our Vision Zero plan or our active transportation plan or do different iterations, we can incorporate this data and say, okay, this data identified this intersection as high risk potential and come up with different solutions for that intersection.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Narvaez.
Thank you. This is really interesting because I think we all want to reduce traffic collisions and accidents. And, you know, I just looked at the OTS report, Office of Traffic Safety in California for Napa County, and most of the cities here are, I think it's about 105 cities, and we're still in the bottom 5 when it comes to traffic safety. So it's very important for us to look at this kind of data to implement our own way to reduce some of those collisions. I have a couple questions regarding data. How are you capturing the data and how many vehicles are in the sample size? So I know we have a significant number of vehicles registered in Napa County plus vehicles coming in during for commuting and then commercial vehicles. So can you talk a little bit about the demographics of the data?
Absolutely. So we capture our data primarily through mobile applications, so cell phone. So that what that does is it allows us to do kind of vehicle agnostic. So if you think about like directly from a car, it's going to need to be a newer car, and so that would introduce some bias around socioeconomic status, so on and so forth around that. And the way we collect our data is in a manner that it's anonymized and aggregated so that we don't know who the driver is. So we can't tell you the split of Napa County residents versus people crossing through versus tourists. It's purely just this is, a sample of all the drivers on there. Typically, we get between 15 and 19% of every driver out there.
Thank you. And I don't know if you're aware, but CARB, California Air Resources Board, has implemented recently the Clean Truck Check program. And most of the heavyweight vehicles have to have biannual emissions report. And by doing that, many have now have data plugged into the vehicles for that. And that may be another source of data for some of the large vehicles, because we also want to be able to track that. If it's, we want to be, I think I'm really interested in to know big vehicles versus small vehicles and what that driving behavior is so we can better plan for traffic safety. And so is there any opportunity for people to opt in to be able to provide data for their driving behaviors, like not identify them personally, but just say, hey, I want to contribute data to my commute in the city? Or is this just a third party where you're grabbing information?
It's more through your typical like mobile apps where you share your location and agree to share data with them. So I guess it is kind of a opt-in process where you say yes, everybody's seen on their smartphone, share data while using the app, share data always, or share never on location, and then so for those who have selected to share their location with it.
And then the final one is the time. Can we sort out the time of day to see when these red areas are mostly impacted? Is there a way to get that, to find out, during work hours or school drop off, these areas are the most impacted?
Yeah, so there are two elements to it. When we look at the driving behavior data, the events data set, and also the speed information, that comes with the timestamp and time information. However, the risk, which is the predicted risk scores, that is not dependent on time. That just provides the information on the how high the risk are on any segment of that location. So in short, yes, we can look at that if there are any specific areas like school zones or where you want to look at how people are driving during school open hours and closing hours. That can be identified and looked into through the mapping tool which we are providing. It has the filter different dynamic filters which can be used to specifically look into those specific criteria.
Great, thank you. So
yes, Director Eisenberg.
Just briefly, it's a clarification of Chair Joseph's question. I know you went through, and perhaps I missed it, where the distribution of this report will go. Will it be sent, the report as well as the tool be sent directly to the board members here?
I can do that.
That would be
The,
appreciated.
the goal was to send the tool itself, which will, comes along with a tutorial and some guidance for how to actually use it, to your public works and law enforcement teams.
It would be appreciated to send it directly.
Yes, we can do that.
Director Moeller or
It's
Williams.
Director Williams, and I'm not getting my microphone to work, so thank you. So thanks for the report. And I'm wondering, is there a way to measure the effectiveness of this report? If accidents don't happen, are we going to credit the steps that were taken as a result?
The short answer is yes. I mean, this gives us a high level indication of where the conditions are. If we were to deploy treatments or countermeasures in those particular areas and then do additional study after the fact, I guess Unidos Middle School would be a good example of that, because the study included that location, which was done in the year before actual treatments were implemented, and those treatments are now implemented during the course of this year, which we could come back a year from now and take a look at 25, 26 and see if we see any reduction. And that's typical for any type of countermeasure treatment, whether it be an enforcement or some sort of infrastructure improvement. Doing a review of what the conditions are and then coming back post-treatment to have an understanding of, did we see the benefit we were looking for and how much of a benefit?
So I'd appreciate if staff brought back periodic reports referring to this study.
Sure.
Because it's not clear to me that we're learning, just as somebody who's some familiarity with the county's roads, it's not clear to me that we've seen information that is much different than we would already have guessed at.
Yeah, there is an element of that, and we, part of the inputs to this study was crash data. Those do exist in
I, as a
the
director,
data.
and probably the board wants to see that the money's well spent.
Yes.
To see that it goes to some, makes a difference somehow. Yeah. So if staff can bring back reports, periodically that will refer to this study, and we can feel confident that yes, this made sense to perform this study, and that it was, wasn't a waste of time and money.
Oh yeah, this was a grant-funded study, and the Office of Traffic Safety grants come around annually. The goal with the Office of Traffic Safety is if you see something positive, and again, I mentioned early on that this one was actually chosen to be highlighted in their statewide report. They're not difficult to achieve. We had hoped to have a little more dollars in the pot on the grant, but this time around they were fairly inundated. But we could apply for a secondary grant to take a deeper dive if needed. The other important thing is that we'll use this study and this data and information as we do our biannual update to the Vision Zero plan, which is coming up at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that the study itself was paid for by an Office of Traffic Safety grant, and we partnered with the police department, I think we talked to Napa PD before.
We were the ones that applied for it, yeah.
And so the study itself is not going to the study itself isn't going to improve the roadway network, but the study informs us in understanding where improvements should be made. And as Diana mentioned, the data is really important when we're applying for grants. They ask for specific data, collision data, or if we had this additional data about risk factors for the roadway network, that's going to make a convincing and compelling case in applying for funds to improve the physical roadway network. And so I do think it would be valuable to come back and look at maybe the same intersections after improvements have been made, to have pre and post data on the roadway factors.
Thanks. And will there be a way to dig down into particular locations? I'm looking at one in Calistoga in particular that I wouldn't have guessed would be on the list, but it is. And it'd be interesting to me, and I think for our public works and police, to know how, that particular location was identified as a high-risk area, high vulnerable area, and whether we want to do something about it or not. But if we know more about how the identification was made regarding a particular site, then we can, probably address it appropriately. So will there be a way to learn how it was that a site, wherever in the county was identified as high risk?
Yes. And along with the map tool, there'll be a guide that helps you understand what is it that you're looking at when you go on that map tool and you zoom into a location and you see a hot spot. It's going to list out what the indicators were for how that was evaluated. And again, data, having an understanding of what it is you're looking at is important. We're not data scientists. These guys are. So it's always helpful to have some sort of guidance and tool, which is why, we want to be cautious about just distributing this tool out to anybody and everybody. We want to make sure that people have a clear understanding for how to use it and understand what they're looking at when they're looking at the data.
That's great. Thank you.
All right.
I'm particularly interested because I saw some slides that talked about the schools.
Yeah.
And, this is some of our most vulnerable population. Will there be some, I'd like to see some conclusions really drawn about this data regarding the schools throughout Napa County that you were able to highlight as high risk. I'm not sure the schools know about it. I know you brought this up to our public safety and our police, and to put, a little emphasis on Commissioner Eisenberg's comments. As elected officials, we have the ability to sometimes put a little extra pressure on our own police staff as well as our public works. So I think it's very important that we be able to kind of look at that final version. But back to the schools, I think it's very important. I was, quite surprised to really see high-risk areas around these schools. I think this really needs to be a focus that I would really like to see, because, we just heard an earlier report about, this agency actually trying to, promote, walking and biking to schools. And some of these schools aren't safe. We need to know where those are, because I think that is a great initiative that, kids should be able to walk and bike to schools, and we're trying to get people out of cars. So, sometimes there's good reasons, but, it needs to be safe for this to really happen. So I'd really like to see some focus on that in this report, if you can, based on, especially some of the slides that you showed us, really putting some emphasis there and drawing the conclusions that I think I'm seeing, that there is indeed some high-risk areas around schools throughout the county, correct? Is that a correct conclusion that I'm drawing?
Yes, we indicated I think it was 6 highest risk locations, but yes, there are issues in and around most school areas. And you may recall that in our last round of Safe Routes to School funding for non-infrastructure, that program produced 33 audit reports of all public schools throughout the entire county. Those are published on the Napa County Bike Coalition website. We also hold those reports. If you want to see one for a school in your jurisdiction, we're happy to provide those back to you. But there are a number of recommendations, I think some of which have been implemented to date, but it is a known challenge in and around schools. Frankly, our schools were designed for students to walk, bike, or be bussed in, not necessarily be driven one person per car to the school. So that poses the greatest risk, is the number of now vehicles in and around school zones that really weren't designed to accommodate that.
So even though, sometimes this data might be misinterpreted, especially considering that, you said that most of the schools are in risk to high risk zones. I think the public should really know about this and be able to, even if they're misinterpreting stuff, we're talking about it here in a public forum. I'm not sure if I completely am on board with, not rolling it out to the public.
The physical report will be published. It's just the mapping tool which is, takes a little more wherewithal to have an understanding of how to use it and understand the data. And, we wouldn't want the data to be misinterpreted.
So this
Yeah.
report will be.
Yeah, the report itself, the written report will be published.
And if
Yeah.
people do have any particular questions about the mapping tool, they can certainly contact NVTA for information.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. And I would echo Director Mulder's concerns relative to the schools. It seems like that's an area we ought to look at in terms of, identifying the risks as well as coming up with some recommendations. Maybe we already have that in terms of those school audits. Any other, Director Manfrey?
Yeah, I've got two quick questions. One is, what was the distance, and I'm sorry if I missed, but what was the distance where you were saying something was near a school?
When you say, what was the?
When you're saying there's an area of concern that's near a school, what are you considering the distance to be for nearness?
Nishant, correct me if I'm wrong, did we say 3/4 of a mile outside the school zone or a mile outside the school zone? I don't recall.
Yeah, so it was, we took a radius around the school zone, so it's uh, something, yeah, around a mile.
I want to say it might have been a mile, which is pretty common when we're talking school zone,
Yeah.
mile radius, yeah.
If you go a mile out from every school in our communities, you cover the entire urban area of every community. So you stop running into other school zones at about a 1/4 mile because they're all interspersed throughout the neighborhoods. But
Yeah.
even at a 1/2 a mile, you're covering essentially the whole urban area of every community of every community in our county. So it just occurred to me, I'm sorry, a little bit late here, but how you're measuring nearness is going to really influence what you determine to be a problem or not. I'm not expressing an opinion about it, but I'm just saying that logistically, the nearness distance that you set will have a big determining factor on,
Oh, yeah.
on what you find. And then if data are not going to be published, I'm generally in favor of having things published, even if there's a risk of them being misunderstood. But if they're not going to be published, just for the record, it would be helpful for people who are maybe more interested in getting into the weeds and would like to access things. How could they request it?
Called a public records request.
So I mean, I'd just like to clarify. So the report and the maps are going to be published. The data tool specifically might be a proprietary tool by MMI, but I'm not sure. I will circle back with staff and ask, but certainly if anybody has a question about the data, the report, the maps, they can contact NVTA staff and we can,
Yeah.
provide the information.
Okay, and that's roughly what I heard, but if data are collected or created with public money, they have to be made available to the public somehow. So even if your mapping tool is proprietary, the data underlying it are owned by the public. So what I'm asking is, how can someone access that?
Yeah, the data will be available to the public and we will circle back on specifically the tool.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Eisenberg, and then McKee.
You turned it off.
All right, we'll try again. Just to amplify what Director Manfrey was saying and how it applies to smaller jurisdictions. In Calistoga, for example, yes, a mile would cover the entire town, but that's a good thing because the entire town is a school zone. People walk, bicycle, drive from every corner of Calistoga to the schools. And so I do think it should be looked at with the larger dimensions because that addresses where the danger could lie.
Okay, Director McKee and
Thank
then Deasy.
Following up to that 1 mile radius, I mean, if you're looking at Unidos, not sure how that school is pronounced, but I drive by it 4 times a day because I work right there. I mean, within their mile, within their 50 feet is Highway 29. And the traffic jam there is so thick. drop off and pickup times. I mean, I'm curious what the risk is because it's not
Yeah.
like there's a lot of speeding or braking. It is barely traffic moving. So
That's a really good point. And, back to what both Joel and Nishant said, having somebody who's from here and on the ground and knows the area and you need us lit up. And I said quite a bit of what we're seeing is on or along the highway intersection. So, there potentially could be a child crossing that
there's
intersection
always children crossing.
to the school. So, to Director Eisenberg's point, yeah, even if it is a state highway and there could be, predominantly vehicle incidents or issues there, there still is the potential. And that's what this is about, is what's the potential? And back to the idea or concept of being proactive, before an incident takes place.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. And then Director Deasy.
Thank you. I wanted to jump onto that as well. In St. Helena, it is wonderful that our kids can walk to school or bike to school. My son does, and it's also terrifying that they are crossing Main Street, doing so to the library or home. So I hope that we keep that and consider it. Thank you.
All right. Well, this is taking a little longer than we thought, but is there any public comment, either in the audience or online?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Kara, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, this is Kara Werner with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition, and just wanted to make a few comments. First is to thank NVTA for commissioning this study and for focusing on vulnerable road users, especially around schools where there are so many. With the sample size of vulnerable road users being smaller, we can't always rely on that crash data. If we had a significant cluster of fatalities, that would be horrendous, right? So having this near miss data is super important. I can't tell you the number of times people have said to us, if not for a second difference, I would not be alive, because someone on their phone just went off the car, straight into the bike lane and then came back in, or they hit the side of a car instead of the front of a car. So that near miss perspective is super important for vulnerable road users. I think this is really timely with especially the passage of SB 720 and the ability to expand red light cameras. I think this could inform some of NAPA's jurisdictions about designing those systems and where those can go. I was, I don't know. It's a mixed bag to see Napa High so high on that list. We know that that's also not just a near miss spot, but it's also the area around Napa, one of the highest areas for bike collisions, which is shocking, given I don't know a lot of bicyclists who willingly ride there. So people have to ride there, and it's a high crash rate. And with the safety improvements coming to Lincoln Avenue, I think that would be a super important talking point, data point to get out immediately, because they're about to have 3 public meetings. And this data really supports those safety upgrades. And then I have a few other questions. I wanted to just echo Commissioner Narvaez's comment about large vehicles. Anecdotally, we feel like we're seeing a lot of the worst bike collisions involved with larger trucks or commercial trucks. So if there's, any available data around that, we would love to see it if you're able to share. And then finally, I was just kind of wondering how this data is informing the draft active transportation plan, since that near miss data was probably, I'm guessing, not available as the plan was being developed. How or might these things merge? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments? All right. Then this is just a file or receive and file.
Yeah, just information.
Okay. Thank you. Then next I'm going to move to our consent. There are 8 consent items. And I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Director Narvaez moved, Eisenberg seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion pass. Let's move to item 11.1, the draft community-based transportation plan public review period. Libby, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. My name is Libby Payne. I'm a senior program planner here at NVTA. I'm really proud to be here to present the draft community-based transportation plan. I'm joined today online virtually by MIG. We have online with us today, we have the mayor, who is the deputy project manager, Daniel sorry, I told you I'd probably mispronounce this, Isfaharo, and then Stephanie Pavon helped put together the plan. So I'd like you to take a moment to imagine that you live at Las Casitas Mobile Home Park, an American. Laura, could you go to the next slide? You're experiencing some transportation issues ranging from being unable to easily travel to your local Walmart to the button on the crosswalk right outside the mobile home park isn't working. You may feel unsure on how to share this feedback or who you're even supposed to talk to about these issues. You then learn that NVTA is coming directly to you, to your community room, where they're hosting an event where they're soliciting your feedback on all things transportation and teaching you about your transportation options that are available to you. So it's during this event that you share all your thoughts and you feel heard, and that you learn that all of your feedback will be going into a transportation plan that's going to help shape future policy. Residents all over the county of Napa observe transportation issues on a daily basis. Oftentimes, only a select amount of residents are able to take their observations and feedback and share it with elected officials, government employees, and those who can take action. Members of disadvantaged communities may not have the same opportunities to provide their feedback. We want the most vulnerable members of our community to have a voice in steering transportation policy in our county, and that is where the community-based transportation plan comes in. So again, I am here today to present the draft community-based transportation plan. This is a culmination of over 12 months of work between the NVTA team and the MIG team, who is here with us online virtually. I'm here today to seek your approval on releasing the draft plan for a comment period that will close on Tuesday, November 18th, and then we'll bring the final version of the plan to a future board meeting. If you could go to the next slide, Laura. So I'm going to just say CBTP for short from now on, but that stands for Community-Based Transportation Plan. The CBTP focused on 5 equity priority communities that were identified by MTC by looking at all of Napa County's census tracts and comparing its disadvantaged community data to Bay Area-wide data in 8 different categories. That's what you see listed here on the slide. These are the 8 categories they used to determine which census tracts in Napa County met the demographic factors to be able to qualify as an equity priority community. Now, as I said, MTC looked at Bay Area-wide data for these equity priority communities. The project team also was able to locally identify 4 additional EPCs by comparing this data to Napa County-wide data. And so on the next couple of slides here, I'm going to point out where these EPCs are, where we focused our efforts. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the ones in blue here were MTC identified EPCs. You have Calistoga, and then the next 4 are in the city of Napa. You have East Amola. Next slide. South Downtown, Southeast Napa, which includes where we are today here at the Transit Center, and the Westwood neighborhood. Then the 4 that the project team locally identified include, if you go to the next slide, Pueblo Park in the city of Napa, South St. Helena, unincorporated Yountville, so all the area just outside of Yountville there. It's a very large census tract there. And then Southeast American Canyon. That's where we focused all of our efforts for the CBTP. So we did extensive outreach and inreach. We conducted 9 stakeholder interviews, 12 events held at specific sites within these EPCs, 4 other general outreach events, and survey distribution and collection. Residents were able to share their feedback on their transportation challenges and offered suggested improvements. The feedback and suggested improvements we heard from community members were categorized into 5 categories, including infrastructure improvements, transit safety improvements, safety concerns, affordability and cost barriers, and lack of awareness of programs and services that are currently available to them. For example, we received a feedback from a range of issues, whether it's something as small as I mentioned in my example, the button on a cross light not working, to larger scale issues like highway congestion in American Canyon, things that we can't necessarily solve tomorrow, but really important feedback nonetheless. And we got a lot of feedback about our transit system since NVTA is there and they know we operate Vine Transit, got a lot of feedback and some things where we were able to easily implement. For instance, we're at Stoddard West Apartments that are off of Gasser here in the city of Napa. Someone mentioned, oh, you're northbound Route 10. The first 2 trips start here at the transit center instead of starting at Napa Valley College. So I have to walk all the way to the transit center to catch an early Route 10. That's something we were able to quickly implement, and we happy to say we did that as part of our August schedule change. So some of these things are quickly implementable. But as I mentioned, some projects are a lot larger in scale. So we shared all the project lists based on the feedback with all the local jurisdictions, got their feedback in terms of, is this something that's funded? Is it in the plans? Is it something you can work on in the future? All of that's included in the plan. So to kind of close this circle here, not only did this project team achieve its goals in reaching some of Napa County's most vulnerable residents, but we also created lasting relationships. If you go to the next slide. As I mentioned in that example with Las Casitas Mobile Home Park, prior to the CPTP effort, we had no connection with this mobile home park. We had never tried to network with them or talk with them before. But after hosting 2 CBTP events here, they invited us to come back to hang out with them at one of their summer barbecues here. So we were able to make these lasting relationships that will transcend even further beyond just the CBTP effort. And again, to reiterate, I'm here to seek your approval on releasing the final draft plan for a comment period that will end on November 18th, and we'll post it on our website. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you for that report, and I appreciate the fact that you learned how swell American Canyon is, especially Las Casitas. And I want to emphasize that in my recollections, when we started the process, we only looked at what we'll call regional EPCs. Somehow you were able to create local ones, which did include American Canyon. And so I was going to be snarky and say, if we hadn't had those local ones, the people at Las Casitas wouldn't have been heard because they didn't qualify under the Bay Area standard. So I'm glad you were able to tweak the methodology and include generally almost some part of every community here in Napa County. So that's my comments, and Director Doring.
Yeah, following along on the local versus the MTC designation for a equity priority community. I'm wondering what the advantages and disadvantages are to that descriptor, either by, I would assume my logic tells me that if it's an MTC designated EPC, that there's maybe more funding available, maybe more opportunities than a local one. And then that's my first question, and maybe I already know the answer, but I want to maybe have you flesh that out a little bit. And the other one is with respect to the demographic factors to determine the EPCs. I'm wondering if it is just one single factor or a combination of all of the factors. Looking at my own situation, I'm wondering, for example, a mobile home park in St. Helena that is maybe the senior population, but maybe more affluent than other mobile home parks in Napa County. I'm trying to figure out is it more than one factor, just one factor, and how do we get on the list if we're trying to angle for that kind of a designation?
Yeah, both excellent questions. I'll start with the first one. As long as it's in the community-based transportation plan, one census tract won't get more funding than the other, whether it was MTC or locally identified. So they're all open to new pots of money as long as you're in the plan, whether you're locally identified or MTC. To address your second question, like I said, we looked at the 8 demographic factors, and when the project team was looking at identifying locally EPCs, we took into consideration basically how many of those 8 demographic factors were higher than the Napa County-wide data. So for instance, Pueblo Park met all 8 of those metrics. So that's like, wow, this is an area we should definitely focus on. There's a lot of disadvantaged residents here, whether it's, as we mentioned in the slide there, it's people of color, 75 or older, 0 vehicles at the house, et cetera. And the project team also, one thing we took into consideration when we were doing the locally identified EPCs is we looked at what we looked at in the previous iteration of the CBTP that was passed 4 years ago. We had an interest in seeing, okay, 4 years ago we locally identified this area. How are they doing now? What differences have been improved in their daily transportation life since the last iteration of the CBTP? So for those locally identified ones, to sum up, it was how many of those 8 demographic factors were met, whether it's all 8. Some just had maybe like 5 or 6 and didn't meet all 8, but still we felt it was important to focus on them. And then looking back at previously identified EPCs.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right. Are there any other questions?
Yep.
Oh, Director Narvaez.
The data here is very interesting, particularly in a couple areas that really stood out to me was the 0 vehicle households. Generally, across some of these communities, you're looking at a couple numbers, couple digits. But then East Amola jumped up to 75%, which is a big change. So I'm not sure what's causing that big jump, because these other communities, you're looking at 5%, 1%. So I'm just wondering what the data set is there for that community that says almost everybody in that community doesn't have a vehicle in the household.
Right. Obviously, I don't have it right in front of me,
Yeah.
but if I were to make a prediction, that includes Napa State Hospital.
Okay.
So residents there probably don't have a vehicle,
Okay,
it's safe to assume. And that also includes the new Napa Valley College housing that's
Okay.
the students are staying at. And some of them may not have vehicles since they're mostly, staying on campus to do their day-to-day needs and maybe just walking to the shopping centers or using our transit system since they ride free now.
That'd be good to have a footnote for that, to make sure
Sure.
that, because when we look at households, are we considering those to be households, right? Versus residents and service providing communities. So just something to think about. The other thing is that these communities that we're looking at may be low income communities, but looking at the same data, 0 vehicle households, almost all of them have vehicles, right? So they're able to afford a vehicle, they're using the vehicle for work, and just knowing the communities, I'm gonna guess that there's multiple vehicles in the household. So when we look at ridership and how do we translate this data into increasing ridership when we know there's multiple vehicles in the household? So increasing that 0 vehicle household might be a metric we want to focus on when we look at increasing ridership. I don't know how we do that, but that stood out to me the most of most of these data points.
Yeah, so the data points are the 8 factors that determine an equity priority community are MTC factors. So we cannot change them. And MTC largely identifies equity priority communities based on a concentration of low income and minority, or having a higher concentration of at least low income and 3 of the other factors. What Libby is referring to is that when we identified local equity and you are correct that the state hospital is included in that EPC, and it has a very low population in that EPC. It's only about 800 something residents. And I would say a vast majority of them are probably at the state hospital, but that was an MTC identified EPC. And we told MTC staff, like, hey, this is a little bit of a different EPC. So what Libby was referring to in identifying a local EPC is we looked at the average of those factors, the Napa County average, and any census tract that had 3 or more above average of those factors was identified as an EPC. And then on the 0 household, you are correct. So if you're how we identify prospective transit riders is based a lot on income and does the household have a vehicle. And so if you are a 0 vehicle household, you are much more likely to take alternative transportation and Vine Transit. So we will be looking at that in particular instead of our transit planning as well.
The other thing too is that low-income households with multiple vehicles tend to have a backup vehicle. So even if it's not driven, if one breaks down, they have a backup vehicle. So not necessarily relying on the bus as a backup transportation method. So I don't know if that's something in communications or just information to that community, but just something to keep in mind in our future plans when we're looking at this data. And what I mean changing, it's really as a metric for measuring success in the future with increasing that, or a target audience to encourage ridership. Thank you.
Director Smith.
Hi, thank you for all of this. I'm looking forward to reading it in more detail. I notice in the demographic identifiers, you have seniors at age 75, which
Mhm.
is higher than a lot of thresholds that I see in all the grants that we get. Is there any thought about that?
Again, those were all MTC identified graphics. I don't know the methodology of why they picked 75 versus 70 versus 65 or 60, but we could talk to MTC and talk to them about their thought process on making it specifically 75.
Great, thank you.
All right. If there's no other comments, any public comments in audience or online? All right. I think the action we need here is a motion to just accept the release or approve the release of the draft plan for the 30-day public review period.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Alessio and Doring, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Libby, I really appreciate the clarity and conciseness of your reporting and the way you've answered the questions. That's commendable. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Right. Next, item 11.2, accessible transportation needs assessment and the mobility manager update discussion.
Good afternoon, I'm back.
right.
This is 11.2. This was by request of Director Smith. As you know, we adopted the accessible transportation needs assessment earlier this year, and that was a study looking at transportation challenges for both seniors and disabled population throughout Napa County. You can go to the next slide, please, Laura. And just as a reminder, we identified 11 priority strategies in the plan. And for the first step out of this plan, we are focused on the 6 higher priority strategies shown on the right side of this slide. Next slide, please. And just another reminder, there are 4 key goals that are tied to each of those strategies, and those are coordination, education, funding, of course, and connectivity. We can go to the next slide, please. I'm going through this because I know that we're behind time here. One of the things that, one of the top 6 strategies that have come out of this is to institute a dedicated mobility manager and recurring committee responsibilities. And so the recurring committee responsibilities are sort of falling to what we're calling our implementation working group, which we have formed since the adoption of the plan. That group is made up of decision makers. Director Alessio is sitting on that committee representing the county and also NVTA. She was part of the stakeholder working group as well. We are walking through each of the strategies with that group and finding how we can provide solutions for some of the challenges and gaps in services. The reason why we identified certain folks to participate is really that they are the decision makers in their organizations when it comes down to whether or not we decide we want to have a cost share. Certainly funding and upcoming funding resources are a challenge. Those are the things that we want to be taking a look at. So what is a mobility manager? MTC, broadly speaking, identifies a mobility manager as someone who would act as a liaison between transit operators and other transportation providers, and they would then orchestrate the providers or the transportation, point those folks in the right direction to solve their transportation needs. So this is very high level. MTC, through their Action 21 framework and transit transformation task force, has been talking about this for quite some time. I will say, as of this date, there is no funding identified to support this action. This has been talked about over the course of many, many years through the regional coordinated plan. although it seems to be a higher level need as more and more providers come online. Funding is less and less over time. And we have, frankly, an aging population that needs support and assistance. So MTC has put together a draft framework guidance. They're still in the process of development of that. They're meeting with all the county transportation agencies. We had the opportunity to meet with them along with Molly's Angels and a few others to have a discussion about what that might look like. At our last implementation working group meeting a couple weeks ago, we had a conversation about this, who is best suited to fall into this, who would be best suited to provide this service on a countywide basis. Whoever sits in the seat will have to have some knowledge about transportation and transportation services outside the county as well, because they'll have to maybe orchestrate rides between counties on paratransit or other things like that. It's still, it's still all under development. And one of the conversations that we had at the implementation working group was that we should really self-tailor this to what it needs to look like within our county and provide that feedback to MTC. One of their, and you can go to the next slide, Laura, one of their next steps is to go around and they're completing their meetings with all the county transportation agencies. I believe they have one more, which is happening in November. And then the next thing that they want to do is to hold public stakeholder meetings in each county. And you can go to the next slide. And this is just kind of a snapshot of kind of where we are today with what that might look like. After our discussion at the implementation working group in October, staff is going to move forward with attempting to develop what our local framework might look like, bounce that back off our working group in January. That group's going to meet quarterly. MTC will likely be holding these public forums over the winter, maybe into January. They don't have a specific date, but that is their goal. When we come back in January, we will review the draft implementation draft framework for our local mobility manager and what we think that should look like, have a review among the stakeholders in the implementation working group, and then bring it back in April at the next quarterly meeting to try to finalize that, all along the way staying in communication with MTC and hopefully finding how they propose to support this financially for all the counties. So that is where we are today. And then lastly, I just kind of wanted to throw this in. I know this is not part of mobility management, but another strategy in the top 6 strategies, which is to improve awareness of our transportation system through targeted outreach. And I don't know if you recall any of the presentation, but Libby and the transit team have the significant amount of outreach they did over the course of the CBTP. Our outreach team with Emily Cherrier-Botts, they've been out at all sorts of community events, providing information about our services to the community, and also our partnership with the newly formed Connections, which is the Aging and Disability Resource Center in Napa County, and that's supported through Health and Human Services and Napa County. And the goal there is that there's no wrong door policy, meaning if somebody calls with a transportation need or any need in particular, that anybody picking up a phone at any organization or service will know and understand how to refer that person to the right place. And so again, some of this is quasi-mobility management. Some of these things are already happening, but it's how do we localize it and form it in a way that it's really effective for us in our county. And I'll just leave it at that and ask if you have any questions or comments.
Well, thank you for the report. My first question was going to be, is there funding? But you've addressed that, which sets the stage for the second one. If we've got to come up with the funding, is this being looked at as a full-time position or a part-time that, you add this to the list of your other responsibilities kind of position?
Well,
I can answer that
yeah,
a little bit.
answer.
So, so the mobility management requirement, or I guess suggestion or direction coming out of MTC is not funded, though we are pushing for funding. And so we don't imagine we'd be hiring a mobility manager And as again, we're coordinating with I always forget the acronym, but it's the
ADRC.
AC, and also nonprofit like Molly's Angels to see what, how we can best coordinate, because we are already doing a lot of mobility management, right? Molly's Angels is already doing a lot of mobility management, and how we can best coordinate to provide that service.
Okay, thank you. And Director Smith, this was your request. so-
It is. I have to say, I feel like the union shop steward for seniors at these meetings. I just wanted to say two quick things. First of all, just huge thank you to Diana. You like dug in, you got the group together, and you've set a plan moving forward, and I'm really grateful. So thank you for that. And then I think that you might want to share with the group who are the members of the working group, because you've got a good selection of people.
Yes, thank you. We have folks from representing Kaiser Foundation Health Plan. We have Providence Health. We have the county, of course, Molly's Angels, Health and Human Services is involved. We have Adventist Health involved. And we will be inviting Olay Health to the table too. You know, a lot of the challenges come up regarding the lack of transportation to healthcare services, particularly for those who live out in the unincorporated areas or aging in place and don't have access. And a lot of folks are trying to get to healthcare, which is located outside of county. So already I think there are pilots. I know that Kaiser provided a grant to Solano Transportation Authority for a program that they have over there to help support transportation. So there are options here. And just the fact that we have healthcare providers sitting at the table with us is huge. We haven't had that in the past with any of the conversations that we've had over the years.
All right, thank you. Director Alessio.
Try this again. Thank you. And that's a great segue. One, Diane, your leadership here once again is stellar, and I appreciate the work and echo what Director Smith just said. We just approved the draft. I have to look at this again. The community-based transportation plan, which also identified as one of those top 5, the lack of awareness. And so there's resources out there. There's resources where folks who need access to transportation don't know where to get it. And then there's also resources that are going to where people are at, where that can prevent that, where they won't need transportation because there's actually services that can come to them. And what has been consistent over the different kind of subcommittees I've been on with NVTA is that there is a breakdown and there's gaps and barriers in terms of what do we have and where do we go? People don't even know where to start. And I think that, you know, having a mobility manager is going to be really critical to connect all this, to be the glue, to connect so people have a one-stop shop to go saying, this is my need. And they can then therefore start, you know, helping them coordinate that. I also think it would be exceptional, really important that the other counties also have mobility managers. And so the mobility managers can then work with a regional mobility manager and they can all be connected because we do have people, we have, you know, residents, again, access to healthcare is one of those big identified areas of gaps where people have to go to San Francisco or they need to go to Vallejo. And how do they get there? How do we co-coordinate that with other mobility managers? I think this is a really important identified area where we can make a strong impact for our community around transportation and safe transportation. So again, I'm going to lean over to my colleague, Dr. Manfrey, as she sits on MTC, and also be the voice of this as they continue to work on this, because funding is going to be important, and this will be a full-time position. There's no doubt it'll be a full-time position.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Any public comments? All right, well, thank you. This was for information only.
Thank you.
And we appreciate the update and the insights. Next, we go to item 11.3, the Vine Transit Youth Fair, and Rebecca Schenk.
Thank you, Chair Joseph, members of the board. Rebecca Schenk here presenting on transit youth fairs as a request from Director Alessio. So our agenda today, on the next slide, you'll see we'll go through some policy considerations, what we can and are doing for youth at this point, and then what would be the cost of free youth fairs. So to start it off, you'll see on the next slide that our former executive director and our current executive director had gone to the Transportation Research Board conference in Washington, D.C., and had focused kind of on fairs, particularly when they were choosing what things and events they wanted to go to. So one thing they kind of saw, and this is looking at national studies, there's no real set rule on price elasticity across public transit systems. It really varies by system. Free fares do not necessarily foster new ridership. It more so matters, right? What's your frequency? Does it go where you're going? What's the time frame? But it does facilitate more trips potentially among existing riders. So maybe, hey, you know, in my budget, I can buy a 20 ride pass this month, but maybe if it was free to me, maybe I'd like to ride, 23 times as opposed to 20, something along those lines. And then selective free fares can just cause some confusion to riders. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, why did they get on and not pay? Do I not have to pay? And maybe that might lead the next person to not pay. So just some logistics there. So also on the next slide, we had done a countywide survey in August of 24. So just over about a year ago, we did get 1,400 responses overall, and that's just a breakdown per community. We were looking at kind of trying to figure out like where did all those transit riders go? And on the next slide, one of the questions was like, what factors really influence your use of public transportation, right? We had an other category, we had a few hundred write-ins, right? Fares did not necessarily come up. And not that, any one survey matters, but this is what we've seen, right, in our different MTC studies where they come out and do surveys on our buses basically every 5 years. So over the last 15-year period, right, fares has not necessarily risen to the top of that. So just giving that some context. On the next slide, you'll see, hey, what do we do for a Vine fare structure right now? So that's the current adult and just seeing the youth, the comparison of each of them. So I guess just some acknowledgement that we do realize, right, that youths have less resources to bring to the table. And then if other things they can do on the next slide that we're currently doing is we do bulk pass orders. So just to give you some idea, so the Napa County Office of, NVUSD Special Education Department purchased 932 passes for their riders in 2024. We get some from migrant education, and then we get some passes as well purchased through Napa County Health and Human Services. So places or departments where kids can go if they need a pass because they are being purchased by these entities. And in meeting with NVUSD, we'd like that to kind of happen on a larger scale. And so getting then to from what are we doing to then what could we do on the next slide. So basically, in looking last fiscal year, we got roughly $2.6 million in fares across all the different categories, right? And of that 2.6 million, about 205,000 came specifically from youth, and it kind of breaks it down by the different services there. And so we're basically looking to replace, right, that 205,000. So that would be what we'd be looking at to get annually. And so on the next slide, you'll see that there are jurisdictions, right, who do this. So let's take Petaluma, for example. So, there are 205,000 is their 180,000, right? That's what they were getting from youth fair. So how did they do that to do free fares for youth? So 89% of that they covered with their city general fund, 9% through a PG&E Climate Action Resilient Fund. They had gotten kind of a one-time payment from PG&E as a result of some previous fires, and then 2% from Measure M, which is one of their sales tax measures. So AC Transit has given free high school and middle school students since 2016, so for a pretty long time now, and all that money comes from Measure BB, which is a local sales tax measure. And then Soul Trans, they have a larger ridership and a larger population base than us. Their youth fares are about $400,000 per year, so close to double our youth fairs. And they're did a one-year pilot that they're going to continue, and they're going to fund that with LC top funding, which is state cap and trade funding. And what you'll see from all these jurisdictions, and we could put different ones up as well in California, is that when they have free youth fairs, they have a local funding source that replaces that. And part of the reason for that, right, is we know under the Transportation Development Act that we have state and federal funding, and we have to get 10 to 15%, depending on if it's a rural or an urban jurisdiction, from outside sources. So we need to maintain that in the same way they need to maintain that. They kind of maintain it, right, by using these local sources. And so on the following slide, kind of general conclusion is that if NVTA were to do youth free fairs, we'd be looking for a local funding source, probably 205,000 kind of in that base year. We'd be looking for probably about 5 years of funding. So we could say, hey, this is the program, this is something we have in place, and maybe some degree of an escalation that we could tie to CPI to increase that slightly over that year period. But wanted to start the discussion today about that's kind of what we'd be looking at, and see if we had thoughts on maybe where we could get that local funding source if this is something that would be interested in pursuing. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
All right, well, thank you. One of the methodology question on the surveys we did, was there an actual question that says, do you think the fares are too high, or
We did not have a specific fare question, no. But on the MTC surveys, they do have, is fares a factor in, you know what I mean, in your choices? And I could get the specific wording on that, but we didn't have a specific fare question on the NVTA survey.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Director Narvaez.
Thank you. I just want to have a little bit better basic understanding of the current use for youth. Do the youth, can they just come in and jump on the bus, or do they need to actually have a card or something to them by themselves as youth?
Couple things they could do if they just hop on the bus, right? And you look 12 or whatever you want to call it, you could pay $1.25. You'd have to have no, pre-planning, I guess, associated with it. You could then come to the transit center or online, buy a pass, or if you kind of ride transit regionally, you can get a Clipper youth pass, but you can just hop on with your $1.25.
And what responsibilities do we have when we have youth on the bus as far as safety concerns, getting lost, parent consent? Those are things that jump in my head that might be obstacles when we want to have, if we decide to do free, as a parent thinking, do I know when my child's on there and when they get off?
Right. There is one classic story like in Philadelphia where somehow, a little kid decided he wanted a hamburger at McDonald's and he just walked out his door and got at the bus. That has not been a big factor for us overall. The only time we've ever had an issue potentially was with Camille Creek students and kind of maybe something at school carrying over onto the bus in terms of an altercation there. But right, I guess, there'd be nothing preventing a youth over the age of 5 from getting on the bus by themselves. But I have 0 instances of, you know what I mean, that necessarily happening. And we have kids, for example, I know that one of the Calistoga City Council members, their student that goes to school in St. Helena at a private school gets on the bus every day and goes, you know what I mean, to the Montessori school after school. Or maybe 8, right, or something along those lines. So we do have a lot of younger kids riding the bus.
Yeah, and I think just to answer that question, it's a public transit system, so it would just be the same as a child or a student being in a public place. We do carry thousands of students and youth to and from destinations and locations throughout the year, and we have not had any sort of, in my recollection, security or safety issues come up.
I'm just thinking about if parents, what they're going to think about, right? If we want to increase the ridership for youth, I see the obstacle is not the youth, is the parents and their safety. Whether the safety, the risk is real or not, that's going to be one of the first thoughts. Sure. So if I have a child there, I want to know, okay, when did they check in and did they check out? And do I have that on the app? Like, for example, is there an app a way for me to see my child, hey, checked in and checked out, right? So I know they got there, because that's going to help kind of help get the buy-in from parents. Because right now, parents drive to drop off kids at school and to drive everywhere. I mean, once you get older teenagers, different. But I'm thinking, you know, the younger students that can walk by themselves and are, you know, not at walking distance by driving distance. So get the parent away from dropping the child off and get the child in the school if there's no school bus. So those are the things I'm thinking about. And the biggest obstacle will be the parents is, how do I know when my child's getting there? And you know, so I don't know how we can get that, but that's just sharing some of my concerns that I think we might face when if we decide to implement this and get more buy-in from the non-riders.
Sure. Yeah, and I think like a parent could make a decision to send the kid with a smartphone and then enable that, but we're not tracking, say, individuals at this point.
Director Alessio.
Thank you for bringing this back so quickly. I really appreciate this, and I need to give a nod to Director Sedgley because he brought this up not quite a year ago, 6-9 months ago, something. But it stuck with me, and you weren't here at that meeting. But anyways, this is on behalf of both of us. We wanted to get a report out on this. So as I look at your table 2, it talks about youth fare. And Yountville's already providing the subsidy, so it's free transit in Yountville for youth of almost $5,000. I didn't realize there's that much youth there. I'm glad they're using the bus.
Yeah, I think they take the B, even if they don't live there, maybe from the park and then venture off.
Okay, so that section, because it is broken down, it's not broken down by jurisdiction, which would be kind of, I mean, I know City of Napa would be the biggest jurisdiction, but it'd be nice if there was a way to track this, the users, if we were able to track it by jurisdiction, if we were going to do a multi-jurisdictional kind of funding approach, how that would look.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You would just know in this case, like, hey, the youth that are riding the Calistoga shuttle, but we don't have a good way because you're not tapping on and off. You're only tapping one direction. What the number of Vine users, say on the Route 10, were youth from Calistoga or something along those lines. We could maybe just do it based upon overall usage or on and offset bus stops as a percentage, but it does at least give you a general breakdown.
Thank you. I think so often it comes down to just in terms of behavioral change has a lot to do with time. Does it save me time? Does it save me money? Can I trust it? Right? Can I trust the consistency and of course maybe tracking? Like Bernie's dad mode is coming out a couple times here. I'm like, oh, that's dad in action here, and I'm glad he's bringing those up too. But that time, the money, and the trust. How do we do that? And because I do see, I mean, this is what the cost is now, but I do see, and what we do want is that we want more young people to access our transportation. And frankly, their generation is looking more at ways of public transit too. Not just the kids in school, the youth, but the 20s and even the 30-year-olds are looking at other ways of transportation other than just our traditional one person per one car, which is what we need to get away from, not only an equity issue and a transportation and connection issue, but obviously a climate change issue with 39% of our emissions coming from vehicle transportation. And they're commuters, they're not kids, let me say, but this is a change in terms of behavior, in terms of how we change to support the needs of the future and the youth. So, obviously I don't have $1 million in my pocket or 175, no, 205,000.
205, but yeah, over 5 years, that's $1 million. Yeah.
My husband would kill me if I did that. But, looking at, and unfortunately, Measure G, there's no way to wrangle this in terms of Measure G shared funding because it wasn't written into Measure G.
Oh, Measure U.
Measure
mean-
U,
yeah.
sorry, Measure U.
No, so Measure U does have a very small administrative portion that can be used to help subsidize low income. I believe it was low income and seniors. But I just wanted to go back to your point about wanting to get more youth on the
Yes.
system and using it. We, the transit staff, NVTA staff, and had a really great meeting with Napa Valley Unified School District a couple weeks ago, and they are very receptive. We met with Rob Manjuela, who is the Deputy Assistant Superintendent for transportation in schools and facilities, and they are very interested in having these reoccurring quarterly meetings where we work on ways to have more make the transit system more accessible and available to students, specifically middle school, which I think would kind of talk to Director Narvaez's comment about safety, specifically to middle school and high school. And we do see a lot of ridership from Redwood Middle School and from Napa High School students. And part of that is because we have such accessible transit for both of those school facilities. So we are working with NVUSD to look at how can we have sales, pass sales, bus pass sales in their school offices through their district, their Peach Jar school district email system, get the word out about transit promotions, because we do a summer transit promotion where youth can ride all month for June, July, and August for $20. You buy a summer youth pass, you can ride everywhere. So these are things that we are implementing in the next 6 months to try to increase youth ridership on the Vine system.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because again, we know the schools are areas where, safe routes to schools and the conflict areas that we just heard about in terms of the school areas being so impacted that there is safety issues there too. So if there was a way that we could continue to do this work and partner with NVUSD, work jurisdictionally in terms of how we could do this on a shared effort. And again, that mobility manager could also help with this, in terms of letting people know when and where. But I'd like to see this, I appreciate the presentation, but I'd like continued work to see if there's what the solutions or recommendations can be in terms of meeting this moment.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see if we can get, say, partial funding. It seems like NVUSD would be most interested maybe in Valley Oak, which we saw in that Michelin mobility study. And this was before that was one of those places where, hey, we have the highest amount after, I think, Unidos of unsafe driving. And so could we do a pilot there where they pay a per student fee and all those students ride free? And that might be at a scale that we could start with. And just in terms of building trust, I mean, I think what we're doing this week, and we might actually be taking one of your kids, we'll see, but we're taking over the next 2 weeks about 500 kids from different schools in NVUSD. Elementary school, I think our youngest is second grade in terms of a group of 100 of those 500, but we're bringing them from their schools and they're going to Napa Valley College, riding a variety of our buses to do performances. So we're taking a lot of elementary school students, and I get a lot of return teachers too. So it's like, oh, we took them last year to see the SpongeBob SquarePants musical, and we're going to bring them back this year. So they must have had a decent experience.
That's great. That's a great way to outreach and get them familiar with the system. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm chaperoning on that one, so I'll do that.
Okay, you report back.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Fair enough. Director Sedgley.
Thank you, and thank you, Board Member Lescio, for bringing this up again at the dais, and for staff to keep on this. And speaking to my fellow board members, I think it's just incumbent that we keep moving in this direction, to increase ridership. And that demographic of our students is probably the highest priority, as the Michelin report showed. That's where it is. And I think, in future goal setting and budget setting, we just have to figure out a way to do it. Earlier in the consent calendar, we approved a $1.4 million bathroom. And a lot of that money was grant funded. I understand that. And so I think we need to look for grant funding. We look for alternative sources of revenue. The school district, I'm glad you were able to attend that, Danielle. And we also have a quarterly meeting with the school district that I'd like to invite you to at our next one to talk about these issues. But yeah, let's stay on. I think we can do it. We just can't say, well, the funding, it's going to cost this, so we can't do it. It's incumbent. This is what we need to do. Everything we do about multimodal transportation, getting people out of cars, this all is part of that. So let's just stick with it. And I think we can get there sooner than later. Thank you.
Director Manfrey.
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of sprinkle in the concept of mobility as a service, which is like an emerging concept for perceiving the provision of mobility by governments as a basic service for residents. just like we, provide roads, provide schools, we find ways to provide essential things so people can live their lives. So it's a way of thinking about mobility that's a framework for basically exactly this, for making it free, making it accessible, and integrating. I think the next step of it is integrate, like the Clipper card does, integrating across platforms, even integrating it into ride shares, if possible. So just something to think about. I know it's difficult to put it all together while doing a public meeting and to think about the funding and everything, but it's a great emerging, concept for how mobility services can be provided.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think Marin is probably the one of the examples that's doing that the best locally. And they use something called a PEX card, which is basically like a prepaid Visa card. People that qualify, right, based upon income, and they're really gearing it towards seniors, get a certain amount on that prepaid Visa card. We're now going to use that same prepaid Visa card to do our taxi script program. So you can do that, covers part of your taxi ride if you're over 65 and live in the city of Napa. But now that we have those cards, there's going to be the opportunity to add a lot of different things on them. So we'll have to think it through.
Director Williams.
So a crucial question for me on this subject that was raised earlier is, to what extent is fare a factor in ridership? If we're going to eliminate fares, say, is that going to increase riders substantially, or is it not going to make much difference as far as ridership? So that's a question that I'd be interested in exploring before we go to the lesser fare or no fare route. Will it really matter and make a difference? There's one other consideration, which is that it can also, when we're talking about serving the public, serving kids, it can be a disservice to children to suggest that benefits are available without costs. Everybody has to bear the cost. Somebody has to bear the costs of what we're talking about, and they're already substantially borne by the public. And so it could be a disservice to suggest that there is no cost to this benefit ridership without it could be a bad psychological approach. So having everybody contribute, even in a relatively modest way, such as the fares that are there, I think can be important in building participation in a social setting.
Sure, like a buy-in.
And just for my own purposes, I'm a former finance person, so I tend to look at this from a financial perspective more so than maybe the others. And what I like is what staff is currently doing, which is working with organizations like NVUSD or Napa Valley College and trying to either tweet, if they've got funding, that's great, but more to the point, organizing the trips and the schedules and trying to create an environment in which it is a more appealing service than just to say, here it is, and we'll make it free. So I think those kind of smaller incremental steps is also the right direction, and certainly encouraging that. And so for my purposes, I think it's worthwhile to even consider the fact the summer pass. I think the report talked about it's $20, but it isn't, which is equivalent to like, 12 or 13 trips, and you're not getting that many trips. So there's also the concept, frankly, of charging something in which you're getting a revenue stream that is more than if you just charged them individually. Napa Valley College, for example, for $8, every student gets a free pass, but not all students are using it. And so it works out economically. So for myself, I would encourage staff to explore those kinds of economic and logistical strategies before coming back to say we need to come up with 200 grand a year in non-TDA money, because at some point that may become a strategy that is going to be difficult for every jurisdiction to be able to meet. And so I see that as kind of the last option, and we should pursue a lot of the others before that, but not necessarily discount it. I think it is important to focus on that demographic, but focus on it from a more programmatic level than just can we come up with the money? So that's my editorial. Any other comments, either from the board or from the public? All right. Well, I think this was more along the lines of more discussion.
Yes.
And keep at it.
Information.
So we'll have more discussion and keep at it. With that, we're on our last item, 11.4, the Joint Powers Agreement Board Governance Structure.
Yes, Danielle Schmitz, Executive Director, presenting item 11.4, the Napa Valley Transportation Joint Powers and Government Structure Discussion. This item was requested by some member jurisdictions, and so it was specifically to revisit the mayoral requirement in the Joint Powers Agreement. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of background before opening it up for discussion for the board level. And I think it's important to kind of understand the origin of this agency and why it was formed. So NVTA, which was formed back in 1991 under this joint powered agreement, was really a result of the county and the city of Napa and the city of Calistoga and St. Helena and the town of Yountville coming together to meet a requirement to complete a congestion management plan. And that was back in 1991. And this was a congestion management plan that was required by state legislation. Subsequently, then I think American Canyon was added into the Joint Powers Agreement. But in 1998, the collective bodies decided to exempt Napa County from having to complete this congestion management plan, but still found great value in the intergovernmental exchange around transportation planning and programming and projects specifically on the highway system. And so they formed the Napa County Transportation Planning Agency. So they exempted having to do the congestion management plan, but they retained the body and the oversight, of the transportation network. Over the next 9 years, more and more responsibility was added to NVTA, which was NCTPA at the time. And this included completing the countywide transportation plan, as well as consolidating all transit services under NCTPA. And so that is really important. Actually, it's been held up as a beacon or an example of what to do by other counties. If you go over to Sonoma County, there are 5 or 4 different transit agencies. In Napa County, there is one transit agency, one transit body with consolidated transit. And MTC uses this as an example for other counties. Amendment number 6 in 2007 was a pivotal point where the expanded board included the mayoral requirement. It also included that the MTC rep sat on this board. So, and that was because in 2007, amendment number 6 added the "and" in planning. So what was Napa County Transportation Planning Agency became Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency. And this is because the board had the elected, so the people that sat in your seats decided that there was great value in having this interjurisdictional body at the time that could serve as a forum for dialogue on matters that touch transportation, including land use, demographics, economic development, community development, and the environment, and at one time, arts and culture, which was then removed from the JPA at a later year. So NVTA's core responsibility for multimodal planning and transit operations functions that affect every jurisdiction in Napa County remained the #1 priority, but because having this secondary kind of dialogue forum, it required that each jurisdiction have a representative on the body that represented and reflected the sentiments or vision of the voice of that entire community. And so that is where the mayoral requirement came from. It was also around this time that NVTA separated from the county, so we were all county staff members at one time, and then we became an independent government agency with staff that was NVTA staff. We weren't County of Napa staff. And so attachment 2, which Laura has put on the Overhead here is really for your kind of understanding of all the various amendments of the JPA and kind of where the origin of that mayoral requirement came from. And I just thought it was very important to touch upon. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I've turned it over to you, Chair, for discussion.
Okay, well, first of all, I appreciate that. In particular, your critique of those amendments, because going into this, I was inclined to say, why not eliminate that mayoral requirement? It just seemed odd. But in the context of that number 6 amendment that expands the role of what is now NVTA, it just puts a whole different light. And now the real issue becomes, should we continue to say, look, our primary role is transportation, but we have a secondary role in land use, economic development, environmental services. You know, should we be looking at ourselves in terms of exploring those secondary roles? And if we do, then it makes sense to leave the composition as is. If it doesn't make sense, you know, then the follow-up question is, should we just, you know, minimize those secondary roles? I guess my point is, having read the staff report and appreciating what the executive director's research has done, kind of makes me pivot to a different question, and that is, what should NVTA's role be versus who should the board's composition be, or what should the board composition be? So that's my only observation, and I throw it out to the board, starting with Director Sedgley.
Thank you, Chair Joseph. That was very well summed it up, and thank you for Danielle for summing it up with the history too. Yeah, with the development of the JP in 1991, but then subsequent amendments have helped out. But even the 2007 amendment now is 14. How many years? 14 years. Somebody do the math, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's time to look at it. And like you had mentioned, Chair, the role, the primary role, as Danielle pointed out, you know, transit operations, in planning and those things along that area. You know, I'm kind of a get back to basics. I think the makeup of the board is just kind of a side discussion on, you know, who we want to put here on the board. But I think a review of the JPA is probably overdue. And in the recommendations, I think option 2, you know, forming an ad hoc to go back to our jurisdictions, find out how our jurisdictions feel about it, get a little ad hoc thing going on. Maybe the first year we can come back with a recommendation on amending the current JPA, however that rolls out, would be my hope.
Okay. Director Alessio.
Thank you. Because that reviewing the whole JPA is also going to be reviewing the weighted votes that the city of Napa has really worked hard to preserve, just so you know, you're opening up something that's going to, which is fine. I think I'm not against that, just so you know, it is going to open up everything. I will say, never being a mayor, and my respect for the mayors, and I do respect your time and the work it takes to get down here, especially those who are coming from up valley. I really lean into every time you make a comment. You bring a wealth of knowledge of your community and leadership and insight that frankly, I don't think as a former council member, I had. So selfishly, I really appreciate the fact that we have all 5 mayors in the county on this board. In terms of the value and the insight and wisdom that you bring and that you represent. I also look at this in terms of the financial responsibility that this board has. The millions and millions of dollars, and maybe Danielle, you can give us some estimate. I know we've had some high particular years with, South Saskatchewan Junction, and that's going to happen again with, Airport in 29, and, in terms of the funding the grants that we're going after, the funding that's coming in, the decisions that are stopping here. They're stopping here. It's not a joint power of agreement, such as like the Climate Action Committee, where there's recommendations and everything has to go back to each council and board. The buck stops here. And again, I think because of the substantial amount of the size and the amount of cost of these projects, I really appreciate the fact that we have our mayors on this board. So that's my position. I'm not opposing looking at the JPA, but I'm just saying, mayors, I really value you being here, and I hope you stay with this board.
And just to answer the one question on any changes to JPA have to go back to our jurisdictions anyway.
Right.
So if somebody is, not willing to agree, then those changes don't happen. So that protects that. And as far as Napa and the position that you were mentioning, weighted voting, if it was a smaller board, that would all just be mathematically counted back out. And I don't think we would have any issues with that. And like I said, as far as if the mayors remain on this, that's something to be discussed by an ad hoc committee.
Director Eisenberg and then Moeller.
Okay, so I really see this as two separate issues. The constituency on the board, is it going to include a mayor or not? If it doesn't include a mayor, then that just means the mayor is delegating to another council person that authority, which would be individual choice or jurisdiction choice. What I think is the much bigger issue is what is the responsibility of the JPA? And my question is, if we reduce the purview of NVTA, is there another interjurisdictional agency that would assume those duties, or a place even to discuss the interjurisdictional issues that come up? That's a question, not an answer.
All right. Yeah, well, the only other one is NICLOG, which historically has been more of a social / generic policy discussion, but it does have the advantages of theoretically all the elected officials could show up and participate. So that's kind of the other entity that exists beyond NVTA.
Yeah, just a point of, in the 2007 number 6 amendment, when I went back to look at the board item, it mentioned NICLOG.
Right.
So it was the members, the agency members were talking about the only place to have discussion and forum was either NICLOG or Napa Valley Transportation Authority.
Exactly. Director Moeller.
My opinion is that, as Director Eisenberg said, that there are two issues here. I think the JPA discussion is separate from the governance discussion. And so right now we're talking about the governance. But whether we want to broaden this out into JPA, I would imagine from a legal perspective, since we're really talking about that and all the amendments, that we could do that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
I'd be open up to discussion on the JPA in any member jurisdiction that suggest changes in any portion of that.
Okay. But I think so, just specifically on the governance, I think that having, like, as the Mayor Sedgley said, a discussion about the governance aside from the JPA makes a lot of sense. To me, each city council, we have 5 members. We do a lot of different things. And all of us have equal votes. The Board of Supervisors, they do a lot of stuff too, and they also have a 5-member board. So in addition to who should be on the board and how many board members, to me, that's governance. What is going to be the most effective way for NVTA board to govern whatever they do that is outlined by the JPA? So I think we can have those discussions separately instead of having them necessarily all together, because I think since we all individually sit on 5-member boards, that we can probably handle whatever breadth or narrowing we make within the JPA. So I think maybe that might be a good place to start. And something that we can all agree on what I think the ad hoc should be given a very specific role here. And whether you want to, broaden it to include, the JPA. I think, this board, if we're going to send an ad hoc off to do some work, should be very clear about what kind of work you want it to do. So I would break those two into two parts. And if you do have a separate ad hoc to do governance, I would suggest that it really include the makeup of the board as well as the number of board members. I think that's going to be a pretty big piece to bite off and digest and come back with some recommendations on. And then if we really want to have a discussion, which I'm certainly open to as well, because even if we come full circle and we don't change anything, we gave it, a good discussion in 2025, 2026, however long that takes. But I think the board needs very clear direction, what you want that ad hoc to do.
Thank you. Director Narvaez.
I mean, what I'm hearing here is that a couple things, but really it seems like the focus of the question is, should we require one of the seats to be mayor or chair? And to me, it seems a little odd that this body is requiring the other jurisdictions of who they can send. It seems a little backwards to me. I think that should be left to the other jurisdictions. I think it's very important for mayors and chairs to be in this body, but I don't think it should be up to us to dictate those jurisdictions who to send, right? We always go back to our bodies and we have those annual meetings and, each jurisdiction decides who they want to send and who they want to sign. And if the mayor wants to be on a particular committee, I think that's gonna go pretty far. And if they're not supporting the mayor for that seat, I think something was going on with that body. But it seems a little backwards for me for this jurisdiction to dictate the other bodies, right? So to me, it's pretty simple. The question is, do we require the mayor or the chair to sit in this body, or do we allow the local jurisdiction to make the determination, let them, make that choice? Like Director Alessio said, I agree, it's very important to have the mayors here, but it shouldn't be up to us to dictate the local jurisdiction. So if we look at this, I think the specific task would be yes or no. Do we require mayor or chair to be in this body, right? And I know we can open up to everything else, but specifically that would be what I'm interested in.
Just a point of clarification. So this body would be making a recommendation. Right now, the JPA agreement is structured because your individual jurisdictions collectively agreed to require the mayor. Right. So it's not this body necessarily dictating that the mayor, it's your individual jurisdictions all collectively agreed that, yes, we want our mayor to serve on this body. So to the other point, the flip side of that is if the determination is made that, hey, we don't want a certain jurisdiction, we want to accommodate them not requiring their mayor, they could do that, but it wouldn't prohibit each individual jurisdiction, for instance, the city of St. Helena saying, instituting a policy internally that we will only appoint our mayor as one of our representatives to the board. They could still do that. It just gives them flexibility. But right now, the way it's structured is that every single jurisdiction agreed to require a mayor from each other entity to serve. So just wanted to clarify that.
Appreciate that. And as Director said, mentioned this was over, nearly 15 years ago, right? So it wasn't this body, it was a previous body, but it's still in our JPA. And it's the way I see it, it's a requirement of the JPA, even though it was agreed by a body, but it was before us. So if we move this forward, my particular interest is not to open up other parts of the JPA, but this specific question.
And just as a procedural perspective to think about, given the fact that we also have a built-in alternate member, a jurisdiction, if the mayor of a certain jurisdiction didn't want to be on it, they could say, okay, I am a member, but we're going to select an alternate, and that alternate may be the one that shows up every month. And so I'm throwing that out in case we don't tweak the JPA at all. And if somebody doesn't want to serve as a mayor, that becomes the mechanism by which to say, okay, fine, leave things as is, and I'll just let the alternate show up. Not that I'm advocating it, I'm just pointing it out. Director Manfrey.
Thank you. Member Alessio, I really appreciate all the mayors being here. I think it's good. And I think one of the reasons that it feels meaningful to have the mayors here is that you're not coming here because voters in one district elected you. You're coming here because there was an at-large election that put you here. And so in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about the whole city that you're from, not part of it. So, I'll just put that out there, is that I can see why structurally it makes sense to send a mayor who was elected at large versus a council member who was elected from a district. I think it also politically gives you the opportunity to come in here and, argue your case for your community and bring back funds and work with everybody and stay connected. I mean, I think there's just a lot of intangibles to it that are really beneficial. And someone made the observation to me recently that the more members you have on committees, the more diffuse the power amongst the committee is, and the more powerful staff typically are in kind of coordinating and determining the direction of things, which I thought was a really interesting comment, but I don't feel that that's necessarily true here. I feel like this is a really well-balanced situation. And I guess I would just, if you have a good thing going, I would just kind of caution against upsetting and rocking that boat too much. And I do also have this other question. This is a total question. I'd love to hear any kind of answer on this today or later, which is, if there was at one time an intentional choice to make this a forum for planning discussions, did those discussions occur? What were they like? And when we stopped having them, why? Did people just decide it wasn't really valuable and we just kind of drifted away from it? Or did it never really happen in the first place? Or, what was that about? And then I guess just as a point of information, the MTC representative isn't necessarily, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not necessarily a member of the board. It could be anybody who is in this community who the committee that forwards MTC nominations chooses and then is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And it could really literally be any member of the community, not even an elected, to my knowledge. So
I was going to say that's not correct, but I believe you are correct. Yeah, in that. And I would just say on your first point, that because I'm thinking of Supervisor Jim Spearing, who was the MTC commissioner for Solano County for 40 plus years. And then he was not an elected official anymore, but he still remained their MTC commissioner because the Board of Supervisors in Solano County appointed him as such. And then onto your first point, I would say we do bring, our scope is beyond just doing the congestion management plan or just beyond transit. As you can see, there's kind of a myriad of different subject matters that we bring before this board, but all of them are sort of transportation related. But at one time, we were the Arts and Council Commission. So the Arts Council was under this body, was under NCTPA, and we had an Arts Council Commission meeting. And so then arts and culture was removed off of that. At one time, we completed the climate action framework for the entire county interjurisdictional body. At one time, we created the countywide greenway feasibility study that then became the Vine Trail. So the impetus of the Vine Trail was the Napa County Greenway feasibility study, which was a document of this body.
What I'd like to do, given the fact that it's 3:30, is get some feedback from the board on what option we want to pursue. I think staff had 3 basic strategies. Do we want a specific amendment? If we could all agree on what that would be, do we want to consider an ad hoc committee? And if so, what should the marching orders of that group be? Or no action and appreciate the analysis that staff did to get us there. So I would like to have kind of a commitment in that direction versus discussing the merits because we're running late.
I just have one question.
Okay.
And I think the attorney might have skipped around it a little bit on the JPA stipulates who's on the board. So if we just talk about a governance issue, it's got to be an amendment to the JPA. So we're going to take that back to our agencies anyway. And by adding maybe something else in the role of the agency is like land use. We have LAFCO that deals with land use, right? So why is land use under a review of this agency? I could never understand that. But anyway, as I stated earlier, so wouldn't that be correct? Is it any amendment to governance would have to go back to the agencies for an amendment?
Absolutely. I think what the option 2 is a recommendation from this board would go to your member agencies. Whether they follow that recommendation and only discuss the governance issue is out of our control.
Yes.
It could be, because I've had situations in the past, because I've gone through several JPA amendments with other agencies where another jurisdiction will bring up another issue. So to Director Alessio's point, once you go down that path, we may say, hey, we only want you to address this issue, meaning the governance and appointing a mayor. But once it's with them, with your respective agencies, it's fair game. Any other issue can come up.
Yeah.
But to your earlier point, it would require a consensus to amend the entire document. So.
Thank you for that. And yeah, we're kind of split on whether an ad hoc is the way to go, but I still support an ad hoc. What would we have to do to not violate the Brown Act 5? Is that where we'd be? Maximum on the ad hoc?
Yeah. Yeah, so that means you couldn't afford to have anybody from Napa City because it would be too close to a Brown Act, and we'll have all the smaller jurisdictions that'll come up with interesting amendments. Oh, I'm just being snarky. Yeah.
May I, Chair?
Yeah, Director Alessio, while
Thank
we're
you.
contemplating.
Thank you for the question and the clarification. That was my understanding too. Also, just to clarify, I do believe MTC is required to be on this. Jim Spearing is different because their transportation authority has different bylaws and different JPA. But according to our JPA in 2007, I don't see that that has changed. Just to clarify the record on that. The other is I think this is a very well-balanced, a very functional board. I've been on this board for 6 years. It's continued to be. There is an opt-out for the mayors who are unable to be here through their alternate. So I just, ask, is there really a need here? Is there really dysfunction? Is there really an issue that we need an ad hoc and to come back with? Personally, I don't see it to be that way. I'm not a mayor. But the mayors do have an alternative to send somebody else if they can't be here or if they prefer somebody else is in their seat.
Can I just make one comment with that? I think one of the challenges when you have a 5-member board and you have an alternate, at one time, we even picked 2 alternates because we had 2 representatives, and then we got into a lot of confusion about Brown Act because you've got 2 members here on the board, then you have 3, so now you're in a potential Brown Act situation by discussing, if you can't make a meeting, turning it over to your alternate about, what direction and what all the background is. It gets very, I've always felt that sometimes by discussing a lot with my alternate that I am violating the Brown Act in spirit. So anyway, it does get kind of confusing. So I would like to make a motion that we form a ad hoc that we'll have to figure out how we're going to do it, I guess, based on votes here. So somebody staff better be, while I'm making this long drawn out motion, better be adding up how we're going to do this. And that we can look at governance and not limit it. We can talk about the need for a mayor, it's going to be a recommendation. It's going to come back to the full board about the size of the board and the need to also revisit the JPA as a whole in terms of its overarching, goals for what we set up in 2007. I was actually on the original NCTPA. I don't know if anybody else was. Leon's not on the board anymore, but I was on that in 2008. We questioned a lot of the stuff and what planning even meant. We finally kind of came down to, it was about planning our streets and our roads and having a lot of interaction with our public works. So that's what planning was, but now it's kind of interpreted as land use, which, yeah, we have no control over land use. So anyway, that's the end of my motion. That's why it would include a recommendation to continue the ad hoc for further recommendation for changing or considering changes to the JPA, but nothing over that
Okay.
necessarily.
So we have a motion to form an ad hoc to look at governance issues, board size and composition, and the overall role. And a second. All right, all those in favor? Well, yeah,
I just thought
actually,
motion
there's
and
a
second.
You're right. There should be discussion on the motion, and we haven't even given the public a chance to weigh in.
Okay.
So, Director Eisenberg.
So when I first heard Chair Joseph's idea about the alternate solving the choice, I was against it because I thought, well, I hate workarounds.
Yeah.
But after the entire discussion that we had previously, I now, rather than opening a giant can of worms, it seems like that idea, seconded by Member Alicio, may be the best alternative, which is do nothing, be cognizant that mayors do not have to attend if they have an alternate. I just think we're going to open ourselves up to possible ongoing discussions, which are going to last an incredible amount of time over what the purpose of NVTA is. And I don't see a dysfunction, but I know that it's going to take a very long time and probably, and may not, nothing may happen, and it's going to require the jurisdictions to all vote on it. And does it require unanimous to change it, the JPA?
Yes.
Okay, we'll be doing this forever.
Okay. And I kind of think there's some merit to that perspective from this angle, and that is the current JPA expands into a lot of areas that we can debate what those are, but they're acknowledged as secondary, and there's no punitive action if we never deal with those secondary issues. So we could try to scale back everything and see if that doesn't open a can of worms. But the alternative is to simply say the existing JPA, as stated, addresses just about every concern we have or don't have. And so there may be more merit in just saying we appreciate the discussion and leave things as is.
Can we call for the vote?
Yes.
And maybe a roll call vote?
Yeah. And if there's any public comment before we do.
1 second.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that the JPA agreement does not give this body land use authority. It just gives this body the ability to discuss land use issues. So just throwing out there to throw another wrench in this conversation, but yeah.
Okay.
So
Was there any public comment? Okay, good. Then let's call for the question of whether we want an ad hoc committee. And let's do it by roll call, just because it sounds like it isn't going to be a voice vote thing.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Bernie Narvaez,
Yes.
Liz Alessio.
No.
Amber Manfree. Mark Joseph,
No.
Pierre Washington. Margie Mueller,
Yes.
Robin McKee,
No.
Paul Doring. Michelle Deasy. Oh, Pardon me. Donald Williams,
Nay.
Kevin Eisenberg,
No.
stand by.
Yeah. Strong letter to follow. All right. That's.
Got 13 yes, is that right, Laura?
12, 13. 14. I got 14.
No is 9.
Okay. I got Scott, I got 5 and 5.
Yeah.
And 2 from Washington, 1 from Marjorie, and 1 from Doring. I think it's 14.
That's 14, yeah. Yeah, I forgot 2 from American Canyon, not 1, yeah.
All right, so it's 14 yes out of
14
20.
yes, 9 no
No,
for
9
out
no.
of 24 voting powers.
Yes,
So it's
yes, it
it's
passed.
the affirmative. The
Correct.
motion
Yes.
passed.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Follow-up question, the formation of that ad hoc committee, is that a chair prerogative or is that?
Typically, it's a chair prerogative.
Okay.
On the boards I've
Then for the
served, so.
sake of time, I'm going to take advantage of that and say, if anybody wants to lobby me to be on it, we'll need some clarification.
We need to make sure there's no more, both, for instance, both Napa can't attend, be
Yeah.
on it, only one could, because that would
Okay.
outweigh. And then both American Canyon could not,
Okay.
and one county of Napa
Yeah.
rep, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I
Okay.
think with that, you could get one from each of the other jurisdictions and you'd
Okay.
be under the vote threshold.
Okay.
I'll double check, but that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, given the time, I'll, like I said, send emails either to myself or probably to the executive director to make a pitch if you want to be on it or not. And then I'll figure out who that group will be and report back at the next meeting. And then we'll start the dialogue and go from there. All right. We're a little bit behind schedule. Any future agenda items other than talking about the ad hoc committee? All right. What? All right.
Just briefly, I was just thinking about a procedural issue for the board, and that is if there is any report, tool, recommendation that comes from any entity that was funded, directed by, contracted by NVTA, that it should be routine that the report, tool, recommendation be distributed to all the board members.
The board
But-
members specifically, not just the jurisdiction.
The board members.
Yeah, just one caveat with that is that depending on the nature of the agreement, if it's proprietary information like intellectual property that we've agreed to and the tool itself is retained by the vendor or whoever we're using, in which case we would not be able to share that tool. It just depends on the terms of each agreement, but generally speaking.
Right. This
okay,
is not a motion, it's a suggestion for future, but easily it could be written in to a motion that if there's an extraordinary exception, that exception be communicated to the board.
Okay. We'll put that on the list for future reference. So if that's that, I originally assumed we'd be out early because we didn't have a closed session, but that'll teach me. All right. If there's no other business, I will say we are adjourning at 3:44.